Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because we have somebody with such a wealth of experience and passion that he is also sharing it at multiple levels, and hopefully he'll be a great role model for you, which is a very important point that he talks about. Stan Silverman grew up in the northeast section of Philadelphia. His dad was an entrepreneur running a small electrical supply business providing lighting and electrical products to industrial and commercial customers. His mom served as the bookkeeper for the company, and at the dinner table conversation always revolved around business issues and the importance of customer service. His parents stressed the importance of education, hard work, honesty, ethics, and integrity, and Stan states these as traits that has formed the basis of his value system. It's one of the reasons why he is a strong advocate for the right tone at the top of and part of the organizational culture. Stan was always mechanically inclined. He and his younger brother, Stuart, used the odds and ends of lumber stored in their garage to build a frame of a go-kart and attached the wheels of an old baby stroller, and they raced their friends down a steep slope a block from their house. As a young teenager, an inquisitive Stan actually made firecrackers. He was leery about being close proximity, and so when he set them off, this future engineer used a match head buried in the firecracker and 25 feet of train wire from his Lionel train transformer to set them off remotely. Stan says that you can't do that today without a visit from the local police and Homeland Security. He says some freedom has been taken away from kids to explore and just be kids. Stan attended Drexel University, where he earned a BS degree in chemical engineering and an MBA. After working 2 years at Atlantic Richfield, he joined PQ Corporation as a chemical process engineer, where he was promoted up through 11 jobs, reaching the position of CEO. As author of Be Different, The Key to Business and Career Success, Stan entered his 4th career after coming up the ranks of PQ Corporation, serving as a director on public, private equity, and nonprofit boards, and writing nationally syndicated columns on leadership for the Philadelphia Business Journal. He writes about his experience and observations as a way of giving back to those who went before him and who have helped him be successful and to make a difference in the lives of others who follow. He writes to share advice with his 2 sons and daughters-in-law, as well as his 4 grandchildren. He writes to help businesses thrive and provide guidance to individuals so they can become more effective leaders, entrepreneurs, and board members. Stan resides in Dresher, Pennsylvania, with his wife, Jackie, who has been his support over the years, allowing him to advance throughout his career. He is forever grateful to her. Stan Silverman, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Yeah, thank you, Jim, for that great introduction. And it's just a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm honored that you're here, and we've already had some really good discussion that I hope we can bring onto this interview. But I've given my Legion a little bit about you. But can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
My current passion is helping others be successful. I coach and counsel a lot of people in mid-career positions. They want to know how they can get promoted to the next job. I give them advice on that. I talk to a lot of college seniors going out looking for their first jobs. They want to know if the resume is up to snuff. I always ask them about the resume. What's different in this resume that's different than the other 500 resumes that'll go into Comcast for that one finance job? Why are you different? And they kind of look at me and say, well, I guess I should be different. And I help them develop from their time in college why they're different from other people. I also tell them the kind of issues they want to raise during interviews, which no other college kid will raise when they're interviewing, such as being committed to continuous improvement, being committed to creating a great customer experience for their clients or customers, and so forth. So I help people be successful, and that's my passion today.
Well, I think you bring up a really interesting point, because a lot of times us as individuals, if you think about that whole self-assessment piece, we may perceive, that we are different. However, we really may be a little bit, convoluted, maybe not a little, not as focused as we need to be, not really understanding, what different really means. So if you can, give us a good background and understanding of what different really is.
Well, so let's look at it in the context of a business. Um, I've worked with a lot of people. I've seen a lot of leaders in my time, some very, very good leaders and leaders that aren't so good. And those leaders that are very successful over a long period of time in a sustainable manner and build great businesses are different in this way. They have great tone at the top, great culture. They hire great people. They have great values. They have a very good value system, and they hold their people accountable to those values. And there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. You read a lot about companies that get into trouble because of shortcuts they take, and they lose a huge amount of reputation. There's huge reputational risk in what they do or they don't do. And being different in the business sense is you really want to run a great company with great tone. And you know what? Your employees will go home and be able to sleep at night. And they'll wake up the next morning and want to come in and go to work because it's just a great place to work.
As you're saying that, and you're talking about many of those things, and maybe I'm a little bit biased because I'm in it and I do this podcast and I talk about it a lot, but, to me, it would seem like at least being aspirational and trying to obtain all of those things that you talk about, would be the norm. But you're saying that is the exception.
In my experience, unfortunately, I have to say yes. You're always on a journey. You're always on a journey to be better. And I used to tell my people as when I was CEO of my company, I would ask them, are we the best in the world at what we do? And of course, you're never going to be the best. Only one person can be the best. So you're always on a journey to try to be the best. And that drives the business forward. And if you don't do that, you're going to try to be the most mediocre in the world at what you do, or you're not even going to think about it, and you basically flounder. You hear many CEOs say, "Well, my company is great." A CEO should never ever say their company is great. That's for third parties to say. When somebody says you're great, your answer is, "Well, we're okay here. We're doing really well here. We have a long way to go here. We're on a journey to become great." Because once you tell your employees you're great, there's no place to go. And there's no, you plateau or you go down. And so you never say, I've never ever said we're great. And our employees understand that. They understand that we're on a journey. We are on a journey to help our customers be successful. That's our role in life. And when you're on that journey, you move towards becoming the preferred provider of product or service in your marketplace. So people want to buy from you and not your competitors. You want to help your customers be successful, give them a great customer experience.
As you're saying that, I started thinking about some confusion that may take place, because, I've learned, and it just didn't happen but a few years ago, that, I learned that there is a difference between being achievement focused and competitive focused. And the fact is what you described from my perspective is more of an achievement focused, meaning that winning, it really isn't our goal. What our goal is to continually focus on trying to be the best. That's achievement based. Where competitive based is, hey, we're the best, we're done. Or, hey, we beat them in this market. Or, hey, we need to beat them. And then it becomes more of a potentially toxic and an eroding element that could be in your culture.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that point up, because you're absolutely correct. You're never done. You are never, ever done. And so you may achieve today, you get up tomorrow, and you got another thing to go. You have another goal to hit. You need to keep on moving forward. And, there are competitors that compete because they provide the customer what they want, and they satisfy customer needs, and they give a great customer experience. And there are other people that compete on other things, where we say, well, we'll cut the price. Even though we don't give you what you want, buy our product because it's the cheapest. That's no way to compete. that creates price wars. You don't want to do that. You never want to compete on price. You want to compete on quality and service and other things you give the client or the customer that your competitors can't give. And that's how you win in the long term. But winning is only today, and tomorrow you have another goal to hit.
Okay, so that brings me to the book, and you just start talking about really the 4 parts in order to be able to be different that an organization, as well as individuals, teams, has to really focus on in order for that to occur. And in the book, I mean, to me, it's just loaded with a lot of information. You've made very, very short chapters within these 4 parts, and these 4 parts are on the importance of leadership, building a competitive advantage, advancing your career, and the last one is, for me, is about role models and role modeling. And so when I start looking at these 4, how did you really come up with those 4?
That took some time, actually. That took some time. And so I had all of this I wanted to put down on paper, but I had to organize it properly so that it made sense for the reader. And I eventually came up with these 4 categories, which I thought would be the most meaningful for somebody that wanted to learn how to do what I was teaching, which is to be different. And it fit together. And I finally said, well, I originally had 5 sections and it was too many. So I condensed it into 4 and it just felt right. And so the 4 that you mentioned is what I came out with.
Well, and we talk about, really the journey piece. You talk about even, constructing this in a way that people can actually leverage it. It took a while, but that journey, and when you start thinking about your career and where you are now and the business landscape and, societal velocity, if you want to call it as such, if you were to talk about the path that you have taken and the experience that you had, how different would it be somebody who was actually more on the earlier and starting out stage of their journey today? Well, how would it be different?
I was very well. My journey is not going to be duplicated anymore. So I spent 30 plus years with the same company through 11 jobs. That doesn't happen today, and I wouldn't recommend it. I would not recommend it. The only reason I stayed with PQ Corporation is I kept getting promoted, and they kept giving me more money and more responsibility, and they allowed me the freedom to try a lot of things, a lot of new things. And so, I wasn't one to sit at my desk and just do it the same way all the time. I always tried new things. I can remember a really scary time when we found that we had to recall a product because it had iron filings in it from the manufacturing process, and I didn't have the authority as the business manager to order this kind of large recall. And my boss and the CEO were traveling in Europe, and it was before cell phones and before text messaging. And every day that we waited to recall the product, the cost of recall would go up exponentially. And it would really go up if our product finally made it into a customer's product. And so I ordered the recall. And my people are saying, "You're going to be celebrated or terminated." I said, "Well, let's hope it's the first." I ordered the recall. These guys got back, and I told them what I did, and I got celebrated. They said, "You did the right thing." And I learned something very interesting. You always want to hire people with good common sense and critical judgment, because you want those people to make decisions that are against policy when it's in the best interest of the company to do so. It doesn't happen often, but you have to hire people that know when to do that. And so from that point forward in my career, I always hired people that I thought had good common sense and critical judgment, and I empowered them to break the rules when they thought it was necessary and to be in the best interest of the company. And so I would hope moving forward that people starting out in their careers will learn that, and I hope they work for bosses that will permit them to do that, because if they don't, those companies want to get into trouble. You're hiring people for what they know, And I think it was Steve Jobs that says, we don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire them so that they can tell us what to do. So it's a similar thing. And I hope people get a chance to work for those kind of companies and those kinds of bosses.
Well, and speaking of those types of bosses and those types of cultures, I think you have a passion for no tyrants, because you shared a story with me that I think everybody needs to hear.
Yeah, so I was probably I was higher level middle manager, and I worked for this tyrant who basically beat the crap out of everybody in his organization. He would micromanage everything, not give any allowance for making decisions. Everything had to run through him. He would just go off on people, and I finally learned how to deal with him. I was almost ready to leave the company. Had I left the company would have been deprived of a future CEO for the company. But I learned how to deal with him. I was tough enough, but we lost a lot of great people. So I get promoted to be president of our Canadian company in Canada. So now I'm at his level. And for 3 years, I do that job, and I get promoted again to come back, and I'm now global president of industrial chemicals, and he's reporting to me. Within 3 weeks of me being back, he went off on somebody, and I fired him. He was shocked. And the folks in that group celebrated for days. I brought in the very best leader within our company. I didn't go outside because I couldn't take the chance. I brought in the very best leader that I knew to take that role, and it took 6 months for him to get those folks to start making decisions again and get the division growing again. And so that was such an important point in my career from an experience point of view. I still remember it as if it was yesterday, and because of that, I've served on 14 boards, 3 public companies, private equity, you name it. I sit on the audit committee of every board because I want to hear what comes in on a hotline, and if a report comes in on a hotline that there's a tyrant in the organization, I want to know what the CEO is going to do about it, because I feel, because of my experience, my unique experience getting to the position I'm in, I want to know what the CEO is going to do to protect his people. And maybe they can change that person, or they can't. If they can't change him, he's out. He's gone. I'd fire him in a microsecond. I don't care how good his performance is, because it's his individual performance. The people below him aren't performing because they don't trust him. So he's got to go, or she's got to go. And I've done that so many times. You can see how passionate I am about this.
You're right. Well, and what you're just saying right there is also that is quite different, because unfortunately, people will say, well, it's hard to find people. Well, they have a certain skill set that I can't get rid of. Well, they make all these excuses for making a really tough decision. And you're talking about the whole strength of leadership and power of leadership. You're not leading at that point.
You're absolutely right. No one is indispensable. And let's assume the person is doing a great job, but they're really hurting the people below them because they're just a crappy leader. You got to move them out of that position. Maybe you keep them, but they're not leading anybody. You put them in an individual contributor situation where they can continue to contribute, but they're not going to lead people, because leadership is the most important skill that anybody in an organization can have. If you can't lead people, get them out of that position.
Well, and that kind of leads me into part of the discussion that we had earlier that I think is really important for us to talk about, because in the marketplace, in the workplace, in society, and it's getting to be a global scenario as far as the business is concerned, and the issues associated with engagement and lack of leadership, pipeline, all of these things that we're kind of talking about is such a problem. It leads us back into how we're really educating our current as well as our future generations to live in the type of world that we are today. So you sit on a lot of boards. You're part of Drexel University's chair.
Or I'm sitting on the board. I'm vice chairman of the university. Yes.
So one of the criticisms that educational institutions have is that they're not developing the worker of today, and definitely not the worker of tomorrow. They're actually developing the worker that we needed 10, 15 years ago. So where are you in thinking on that?
And I would agree with you. I have a lot of conversations with professors, not only at Drexel, but in other universities also, that we need to teach what I would call power skills to our students. The power skills are the skills about getting along with people, forming teams, using emotional intelligence in making decisions, using good critical judgment, knowing when to let somebody go because they're not a good leader. And we need to teach these skills. We need to teach the skills of networking. I see it so many times. These young people, they're on their phones all the time, and they've lost the ability to talk to people. Well, not only have they lost the ability to talk to people, we also don't teach them how to walk into a room where a cocktail party is going on, or a reception is going on, and there's maybe 10 or 15 groups of people talking. They need to know when to break in, when not to break in, how to excuse themselves from the group to move on to the next group, how to develop maybe 2 or 3 relationships that you can continue on, and not only giving out 5,000 business cards in an hour. You need to focus on who you might be able to help, or they might be able to help you in the future. Develop those skills. We don't teach those skills. We don't. Not only don't we teach them, we don't teach that they're important, but they're so important. And so our universities need to teach this. One of the problems is that a lot of our professors have never really done this. They've come up through research and they teach. They're great at technical skills, but they're not great at soft skills, or what I would call power skills. Power skills are just as important as technical skills for success. I've seen so many people with great technical skills, they have 0 power skills and they don't make it. They don't make it.
What you're talking about right there, they've actually done some studies on that. And it's technical skill and ability. When you start talking about that track level and getting to that middle management, it's the technical skills that can get you to that level at a pretty good level. But unfortunately, those skills have to switch in order for you to go up to that next level to what you're talking about. And so somebody who's at that most senior level, while the technical skill is very powerful for them because they essentially know what the business does and how the business does it. It does have value. But now they've moved from a situation where they've got to actually have the entire organization have a strong culture. They have to create leaders. And you're right, that is a totally different skill set. So how do we fix this?
Well, you can fix it in the schools by letting people to be aware of it and to set up situations within the courses where they have to work within teams. And a lot of people are doing that. A lot of schools are doing that, where they have to deal with various personalities, where they have to deal with clashes in personalities on their team and get people to work together. But you really get this experience being out in the field in your real life is where you really need to do it. And you need to be aware that you need to build those skills. And you need a lot of emotional intelligence. In fact, emotional intelligence is more important than IQ when you get to that point. IQ is the entry level. In fact, it's in my book. There was a paper developed by a researcher at one of the universities where IQ will get you to a certain level. EQ will take you further up. So it's the price of getting in. IQ moves you up, and you just need to continue to practice it. So I would recommend to college students, get on a lot of committees, a lot of extracurricular activities, lead groups around the school, get involved in athletics, become an athletic leader, and you develop those skills there. So when you go out into the marketplace, you've gotten some basics in terms of developing those skills.
It's really interesting that you say that, because there was a report that came out, or a study looking at Nobel Prize winners, Nobel laureates. And what they were saying is that those people who are the receivers and recipients of those awards of recognition were not the smartest in their field. They had higher EQ, and that's what enabled them to get recognized and win awards.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? It means they were able to tap the works of others and build on the works of others. They were able to collaborate together, and they were able to advance their science or the technology in their area of expertise. And actually, the whole world is built upon that.
Most definitely. So when I start thinking about, all of the case studies and there's just loaded in this book, all these particular case studies, I would have to say there's kind of one for you that's like, that's the one that kind of hits me the most. That's the one I have the passion for the most. Which case study would that be?
Well, it's got to be the Wells Fargo case study. And closely following that is Volkswagen, and probably after that is Theranos. But let's talk about Wells Fargo. As most people know, because it's been in the press, Wells Fargo had a problem back around 2014-15 where the people that worked in the bank branches were incentivized and actually pressured to open up accounts that clients did not need. because that was part of the metric used to pay the senior leadership of that group big bonuses. And they were encouraged to do unethical things that bothered people a lot, the people down at the lower level. And in fact, it's interesting, they didn't call their bank branches, they called them stores. That's what it was. I don't want to bank at a store. I'm not buying anything. I want a bank where I'm going to get advice. I want to go to a bank branch. But they called them stores, so that kind of set up the culture. And when this blew up and it became public, they were fined millions of dollars by the government for doing this. But that was only a drop in the bucket. As soon as it got out, their reputation went down. They lost billions and billions and billions of dollars in business from cities and governments who didn't want to do bond work with them, and for corporations that didn't trust them, so they took their business elsewhere. It probably cost them $40 to $50 billion, all told, and they lost a huge amount of reputation because this occurred. Now, why did it occur? Why didn't it stop? There was a number of studies done, led by a lot of columnists at CNN and at the Wall Street Journal, that showed that 6 employees that used the ethics hotline to report what they thought was unethical and illegal practices were fired. Can you imagine that? It's against federal law to fire whistleblowers. And then my question in the chapter that I wrote is, why did the board allow this when it came in on the hotline? Were they asleep at the switch? I'll tell you, I would have been, if I was a board member, it would have never happened. And actually, John Stumpf, who was the CEO, who was finally forced to retire, he told the board the first year that he has a problem. The board said, well, get it fixed, John. The second year, he came back and said he still has the problem. If I was the CEO of Wells Fargo, I'd expect to get fired that day. You never let it go that long. I, as a former CEO, would expect to get fired. That's the standard I hold myself to. If you don't get it fixed, you're out. Of course you're out. It went on for 5 years. And eventually Stumpf left. And they replaced him actually with the COO at the time. And I really wondered why, because he was still with the bank. They needed somebody from outside. And they finally are bringing in somebody from the outside.
Well, as you're talking about that, I started thinking about, your comments about were they sleeping at the wheel and talking about the board. And so for me, when I think about the, board experience that I've had for a couple nonprofits, a couple for-profits, is that, one of the things that we're always trying to be mindful of is not to get into the daily operations of the organization itself. But when you're starting to talk about this whole hotline thing, isn't that kind of getting into the operations? I mean, where is that line, and what do I have to do?
Okay. Absolutely not. I've written a lot of articles about the line between governance and operations, and I never cross that line. But let me tell you, when it affects the reputation of the company, which can affect how the shareholders are affected in terms of reputation and the drop in stock price, if the board is not there, they're not doing their jobs. That's why the hotline comes in to the audit committee, right to the audit committee. And if the hotline report is about the CEO, it goes directly to the chairman of the audit committee. It doesn't go to the CEO. It doesn't go to the committee first. And so it's the responsibility of every board member to make sure that the reputation of the company is protected, because that impacts the shareholders and the shareholders' value and what they have invested in the company. And I've been through a lot of CEO and performance reviews, and my fellow board members only want to talk about the numbers. They want to talk about financial performance. I said, no. We're going to talk about tone, culture. No, we don't really have to talk about that. And I dig my heels in, and I just won't let go. I'm a barracuda on that because I've seen what happens. I was not protected by my board at PQ Corporation when I worked for this tyrant. My people were not protected. And so my job is to protect the people from tyrants and to protect their reputation. And I'm going to hang tough on that like a barracuda.
Well, obviously, you are a man full of passion and some deep wisdom. And one of the things that we focus in on this show are quotes in order to hopefully bring those things to the present and in the forefront. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
You never know where the future will take you. You never know where the future will take you. It's my favorite quote. I'm in my 4th career. When I graduated school with a degree in chemical engineering, I never thought I'd be an author of a book. I never thought I'd come up through my company to be a CEO. I never thought I'd sit on 14 boards or I'd be a nationally syndicated columnist, widely read on leadership. And so you have to take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way that you want to take advantage of. And you need to make your own opportunities. You just can't sit around and wait till they come to you. You need to make your own opportunities. There's another quote that I love, and it goes something like this: "Don't tell me it can't be done. Don't tell me it can't be done." Everybody's familiar with the movie Pearl Harbor. And if they recall the scene where the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, and a couple of days later, we declare war on Japan, and President Franklin Roosevelt is meeting with his Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he wants to bomb Tokyo, and they're telling him it can't be done for this reason and that reason, and that, and he actually stands up and out of his chair, which just shocks everybody, and he says with such a serious look, "Don't tell me it can't be done." A month later, a sub-commander comes and visits him and says, "I know how to do it. We're going to launch bombers off a carrier, and this is what we're going to do." And that raid was led by Colonel Doolittle. So whenever somebody tells me it can't be done, I say, don't tell me it can't be done. Tell me how we can get 80 or 90% of the objective, which might be good enough, or maybe even 100% by breaking paradigms and doing things differently. And I write about that a lot in my book. But don't tell me it can't be done. And as you're an individual coming up through your organization, never tell your boss it can't be done. Maybe it can't be done the way you're thinking about it, but give him alternatives on how you might approach it, or give her alternatives on how you might do something different. The boss didn't hire you to tell him that or her that it can't be done. They want solutions. So figure out how to do it, even if you have to get other people involved. It's a strength. It's a strength to ask other people to get involved. Even if you don't know how to do it, bring other people together, you'll get it done.
It's really interesting because one of the things that they talk in regards to employee engagement is that employees seek to find autonomy. They don't want to be task and policy laden, and they don't want that, right? They want to have more autonomy. And so what that means is you have to take advantage of getting the autonomy, right? You have to earn the autonomy. You have to build your way to getting the autonomy. You can't just expect that it would be given to you. And you also, on the flip side, can't let that policy and all that stuff get in your way, because maybe it is that you're working for an organization that you shouldn't be in, right?
Yeah, so there's something else I write about in the book, and it goes something like this. Let's assume you have all the authority in the world to make a decision, but there's risk in the decision. You're unsure. You're just not quite ready to make the decision. You need some advice. You can ask other people for their advice and for their input. It doesn't mean you have to listen to them. It's not a weakness. It's a strength to ask for advice and opinion, because that way you're de-risking your decision. People are somewhat risk adverse, especially in an organization that doesn't tolerate risk, which is another thing. They need to allow their people to make mistakes and take risks. They don't learn it, but they need to make responsible risks, and they need to de-risk their decision. The best way to de-risk their decision is to ask other people for their opinion, and that's what you need to do.
So I think you bring up the really good key point of that, is that you don't have to necessarily accept it, but gaining the perspective has significant value. So when I start thinking about, you going through this journey, 11 progressions in responsibility up to CEO, where you are now, starting your fourth career, I know there's a lot of humps that you've gotten over, or that you've been able to use as opportunities to learn for yourself as well as to teach others. Is there one of those opportunities that you can share with us so that we can learn more about getting over the hump?
Yeah, well, the big one was the one I just described a few moments ago. That is working for my tyrant. I learned so much working for my tyrant, more so than had I not worked for him. The other thing everybody needs to do to get over that hump is to get out of your comfort zone. And I have a great example of that. I was a business manager at our company, and I was business manager for anhydrous sodium metasilicate. It's unnecessary to know what that is, but let's call it ASM. It's used in detergency, in industrial cleaning. So Rhone Poulenc, which is a French company, decided to dump their ASM made in France into our country below home market price in France, and they basically stole a lot of our business. And so that qualified as dumping product, and therefore we could take them to court and get dumping duties assigned so to have them stop doing that. So I went to my CEO and I explained the situation. He said, yeah, go ahead, go sue him. I said, okay. I went to our GC general counsel. I said, I need an attorney for this purpose. He says, I got just the guy. He picks a guy who's very good at anti-dumping cases, not a Wall Street or a New York guy, the guy in Philadelphia, right? And actually, he was a pretty scrappy guy, that kind of lawyer. So my product and manager and I meet with him, and he says, yeah, this is a great case, but I'm not going to run the case. You're going to run the case. I said, what? He said, you're going to run the case. Because when you go in front of the International Trade Commission and the 5 commissioners, if they see business guys presenting their case, they're much less harsh on breaking a protocol in the court than if it's an attorney. So as an attorney, they're going to hammer me and my colleagues for even the smallest mistake. They're going to give you wide latitude because you're just a bunch of business guys trying to protect your market. I will teach you what to do. And so we did this, and we won the case. We won the case 5-0. And I felt like we won the Olympics. I felt like we won a gold, and they assigned the highest dumping duty to that product, so that they had to stop importing it, so they protected our market, and it lasted for years and years and years. And so I was so out of my comfort zone preparing the case. I'm not an attorney, I'm a business guy. I'm an engineer as a business guy, right? And we go in this huge chamber with these 5 commissioners. It's like the Supreme Court chamber, except it's the International Trade Commission. And I'm looking around with these high ceilings thinking, what the hell am I doing here? Well, you know what? We learned a lot about ourselves because we did something that we never did before. We were way out of our comfort zone, way out of our comfort zone. And it felt great. It felt great. So sometimes that's what you have to do.
Well, it seems like you also had a good mentor, in that lawyer,
Yes,
and that's
did.
important. While you may have been placed with him, I think what we all have to do is proactively try to find those types of people. All of us, doesn't matter where we are in our journey.
You're absolutely right. We don't grow by ourselves. We grow because people help us, and if we're smart, we're going to take advantage of that help. And we're going to play it forward because we're going to now help people who are coming up behind us. And that's what I do. I help people because I help future leaders and help develop them because I was developed by the people that came before me. That's our job. That's what we do.
That should be our legacy, for most certainly. Okay, so when I started looking at your journey, start talking about those 4+ decades, we're talking about your 4th career. I'm sure that you have still several goals that you'd like to achieve, but can you share one of those with us?
Yeah. First, let me say that people are very hot on goals. You graduate from school and you need a whole bunch of goals. I only had 2 goals in my life, and they were sequential. They weren't at the same time. When I got out of school, my first goal was to rise to a position where I could run a P&L. I could be the general manager of a business and be responsible for a P&L. I got that some years later when I was promoted to be president of our Canadian company. And it was my P&L, it was my company. As soon as I reached that point, I'm thinking I could become CEO of the company. And that was my second goal. So I only had 2 goals. And there was no timeline, there was no time limits. It was just 2 big goals out in front. And I worked towards those goals as quickly as the opportunities allowed me to do. I didn't get upset if I thought that and I took a couple of lateral assignments and promotions to do it. And so that's a lesson for all of us. Let's not focus so much on so many little goals. Let's pick the big goal out there and shoot for the goal. And you don't have to have more than one at a time. You can do the second goal after you do the first goal. So what is my goal now? My goal now is to help people be better leaders, help people be better business people, help people be better board members, help people rise up through their careers, and so that they become different than their peers so they get the next promotion. And I teach people how to be different than their peers, what to talk about when you go into an interview, what to do when you get into your job, how to be collaborative, how to build teams, how to never throw people under the bus. Those people get tossed out real quick. And so my job is to help people be successful, and that's my legacy. And it's my legacy to, as I wrote in the foreword of my book, it's the legacy to my kids and to my grandkids.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Stan, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that can help us move onward and upward faster. Stan Silverman, are you ready to hoe down?
I'll do my best, yes.
All right. All right. So what's holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Nothing.
What's the best leadership advice you have ever received?
The best leadership advice I've ever received is to lead like you would like to be led.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I relate to people really well. I get to know them.
What is one of your tools that helps you lead in business or life?
One of my tools is my commitment to ethics and integrity, and my disdain for anyone that's not ethical or doesn't have integrity.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our Legion? It could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to Be Different on your show notes page as well.
Thank you. So Good to Great by Jim Collins is the very best leadership book I've ever read. And I've read a lot of them. It is phenomenal. And one of the points in his book is you want to be a level 5 leader, which means that you're humble, you're not imperial, you're there to do your job. You think about and care about the folks around you because they are the ones that make you successful. And he reached that conclusion by studying company after company after company who returns the best returns over a long period of time in the stock market. And that's a common trait for the leaders that led those companies.
Okay, Stan, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. So imagine you had the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you can take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can only take one. What skill or knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
It's to be humble as a leader and understand that you get results through other people. You don't get results yourself. Your job is to set tone at the top, culture, and cut people loose to do their thing.
Stan, I had fun with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Yeah, the best way to do it is through my website. Look for or type in and search for silvermanleadership.com. You'll get to my website. You'll see all the articles that I've written. You can buy my book by going to Barnes & Noble and just typing in my name, Stan Silverman, and the title will come up. Be Different, the Key to Business and Career Success.
Stan Silverman, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.